Over the years, I've garnered about 10,000 followers on the page. And I've heard it described pretty accurately in a number of ways. I've heard it described as a Mesopotamian mood board, as an Assyrian counterculture, digital arts district of Assyria, really like cool kind of taglines.
Okwu Enwezor was a Nigerian-born art curator, writer, and poet. He left his home country of Nigeria and settled in New York, taking up poetry, and eventually landing in Art Review's list of 100 most powerful people of the art world. Living through war and resettlement, he told the New York Times Magazine in 2002, "I learned what it means to be the other, even within the rooms of one's own home. Coming from Nigeria, I felt I owed no one an explanation for my existing, nor did I harbor any sign of paralyzing inferiority complex." The Assyrian word for diaspora is totawuta, defined as the act of one who settles in a strange land. Hi everyone, Peter here with you, and I'm so happy to be bringing you another episode of the Assyrian Podcast. I had a chance to sit down with Nardin Sarkis and Akadina Yadegar for this week's episode. We spoke about contemporary Assyrian art, Nardin's visit to northern Iraq, and he reveals who's behind the Instagram account that many of you follow, Mesoportrayal. And then we bring in Akadina to talk about their brainchild art exhibition, Diaspora in Bloom. Support for this week's episode of the Assyrian Podcast is brought to you by Tony Kalogerakos and the injury lawyers of Illinois and New York. If you know anyone that has been in a serious accident, please reach out to Tony Kalogerakos. Tony has been recognized as a top 40 lawyer and a rising star by Super Lawyers publication and has obtained multiple million-dollar awards. Tony can be reached at injuryrights.com or 847-982-9516. And here's Nardin and Akadina. First of all, I want you to open up with who you are, how did you get to where you are, give us a little bit of information on your background, and I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having us on the podcast. Love listening on my drives all the time, so it was exciting to have the chance to be on it. Sure. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised here in San Jose, California, which for those that don't know is in South Bay, out in Silicon Valley. So I was born and raised here and went to school out at UC Santa Barbara. When I graduated, I moved back to the Bay Area to work in government relations. So I kind of work in the political side of tech.
So where do you currently work now?
It's called the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. We're a public policy trade association, which is a long way of saying that we represent the community quality of life issues that impact tech companies and their employees.
And how long have you been there?
2 years.
And what are your day-to-day tasks there?
Meeting with a lot of elected officials on all the levels. So being the face of the organization, meeting with mayors, city councils, congressional representatives, and then California state legislators too.
Have you ever met our Congresswoman Anna Ishu?
I have. I've had the pleasure of actually volunteering for her campaigns before I started working here. And in this capacity, we work with her quite a bit as well.
Here at Assyrian Podcast, we like to crowdsource our questions, and a lot of these questions, they're loaded questions, but I feel as though they're loaded for a reason this time around because we're going to get a lot out of both of you. You've been raised in a strong Umtanaya household as well as a Christian one. Could you talk about your family lineage a bit, as well as the values you were raised with growing up?
Sure. Wow, that is kind of a heavy question to start off with. Let's talk about genealogy. Sure. So that's true. I was raised in a very Assyrian household and as well as pretty religious as well. From my mother's side, my grandfather is Gasha Shmuel Eshach, late Gasha Shmuel Eshach. For those that are from Iran, they probably know of him as being the head of all of the Protestant churches in Iran. So not just the Assyrian churches, but all of the Protestant churches that were in Iran. He was like the head of them. And he was the pastor of the Protestant church that was in Tehran. There it was both evangelical and Presbyterian, okay. St. Thomas. And so he went on to, I guess, mentor a handful of pastors that are now like the 5 or 6 Protestant pastors here in the Bay Area. They were all kind of his students and went to become pastors in that way. One of them is my uncle, Gasha Freydon Asov. So from that side, I grew up with a lot of tradition and kind of a microculture, I like to call it. I think that a lot of Assyrians, even in Iraq when I went in for my Gishu trip, a lot of them didn't even know that we have such a big Protestant community.
Yeah.
So I like to describe it as like a microculture within our culture, but I grew up in the kind of evangelical Assyrian subculture, I will say. And from my father's side, less religiously involved, more cultural.
What years do you recall? What years your grandfather was active in Tehran?
So he was the kasha of the church that they call it Umrat Amirabad, because that was the neighborhood that it was in. I believe he was like very active in the main pastor of that church in the 60s and 70s, leading up to the revolution.
And at what point did your grandfather, your family leave?
So prior to the revolution, the Iranian Revolution of 1979, my two uncles, which are his sons, were sent to study in Los Angeles. So they were living in LA before the revolution, and then he stayed there through the revolution. A couple years after that, him and his wife, my grandma, and my mom all immigrated.
It's evident language was strongly emphasized in your household, because even though you were born in San Jose, at 20-something years old, you're fluent and comfortable speaking in our own mother language.
Basima.
Which isn't always common to see. What is your perspective on our language?
It might be surprising to some that know me now that I'm very involved in our community, but I definitely grew up with a very tumultuous relationship with our language. I was very expressive and talkative as a kid, kind of like I am still today, but I would often get frustrated because I felt like I couldn't express myself in Assyrian properly, and everyone around me wanted me to speak Assyrian, this language that I felt like inhibited me a little bit.
Yeah.
But one thing that I really, really respect my parents for is that as much as I was stubborn and responded in English literally for years and years and years and years of my late elementary and middle school life, they stuck to it and they would always respond to me in Assyrian. That didn't mean that they cut conversations short. They let me speak how I wanted to communicate, but they really emphasized that at home and in our family home and in church and in Shotaput and all of these communities, we speak our own language. And so they always responded to me in Assyrian. And I think that was key because I think I really did internalize all of that vocabulary, all of those words. They sent me to Saturday school and all of that. And then one day I was in high school and I kind of just had an epiphany. It was almost overnight really, where I was trying to think of a word to write, and I think it was like a college admission essay that I was writing, and I couldn't think of the word in Assyrian, and I thought, well, I'll just ask my mom. And then I paused and I said, well, one day, hopefully far, far from now, she won't be here and I can't ask her, and it's really just up to me and up to my friends and up to everyone that has been given the gift of the Assyrian language.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I really had a change of heart, and I started from around late high school through college to very intentionally only speak Assyrian in the house and with anyone who really could speak Assyrian with me. And at first, it was kind of tough. At first, it was a little bit like rusty. I always spoke Assyrian, but it wasn't as smooth and conversational. And,
Sure.
And there were some words here and there that might have pronounced funny or whatever, and people would snicker, but I would keep at it. And my parents were really supportive and really happy that I kind of came around. And over the last, I would say 6 to 8 years, I've become so comfortable into the extent that I write poetry and stuff in our mother tongue without translating it. I write it just instinctively in our language.
That's beautiful.
So
honestly. Do you find yourself thinking, like your train of thought as you go about your day, do you find that to be in Assyrian, or does it go back and forth between Assyrian and English?
Yeah. NPR has a really cool podcast called Code Switch that a lot of people have listened to. And one of the episodes, they talk about how bilingual people, depending on what they're talking about or what they're thinking about, will switch to thoughts in one language or another. And I think that kind of pertains to me. So if I'm at work, very rarely do I think in Assyrian, but if I'm thinking about like idioms for example, I think of them in Assyrian, and often they'll come out of my mouth like translated, botched in English.
Yeah.
The other day I was at work and I found out something about a coworker that I didn't really like, and I turned to one of my other coworkers and I said, she just fell from my eyes. And everyone was like, what? And I was like, yeah, she just fell from like min ayni pilla.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, yeah, there's some funny.
Like that level of respect isn't there with her.
Right.
So Renya especially, Renya and Joe and Avi have told me in the past that when they took you to Gisra or when you were a part of that cohort, the Assyrians there loved you and they were in love with the way you spoke Assyrian. Because they love Iwan Agassi there, and I guess they equated it with...
That was my nickname during that trip. Hey, Evan Agassi, Tile, Dule, Tile, Lishanu Khulia, and they were very amused with my Assyrian for sure, because I definitely have a very strong Urmijnaya dialect when I speak Assyrian.
That is actually a great segue into the next question. Mm-hmm. 5 years ago, you decided to go on Gishru to see parts of our ancestral homeland in Turabdin and in Gerbiya, which is also known as northern Iraq. What was going through your mind when you decided to go?
So you're right in that I went on the trip 5 years ago, but I decided I wanted to go 6 years ago, which was one of the first official years they were taking the group. I had listened to Natalie Babella give a presentation at State Convention, and it really moved me. I felt like it was something that I really wanted to do, and it was at a time where I was just getting involved with being involved in our Umtanaya community here in the Bay Area. And I felt like it was a natural next step. But it took a whole year of convincing my parents, who had never been to Iraq. My maternal grandmother was actually born in Baghdad because her family had left Urmi to Baghdad as refugees from the genocide. She was born in Baghdad and then they moved back to Iran. But other than that random fact, none of my family had even been to Iraq. And it was kind of taboo. They were like, we ran away from that region of the world, and like, why do you want to go? But it was in me, and my mom told me for 1 year, think about it. If you still want to go in a year, we'll talk. I think she thought that I wouldn't want to go in a year. I still did, and I came up and I said, hey, Mom and Dad, like I applied, they're sponsoring me. There's this awesome opportunity to go to Bet Nahrin. I guess I can only describe it as like a conscious thing. Like there was a calling that wouldn't give up, that Nardin, you need to go.
When I went in 2018, this was after many years of Susie Yonan, Joe Danavi, and other peers who had gone, were always coming back and telling me, you need to go, especially you. And for some reason, whether it was work or personal circumstances, but I felt as though the year that you go is meant to be.
Yeah,
absolutely. So maybe it wasn't meant for you to go that year that you heard Natalie's talk, but it was meant for you to go the year after. But I want you to talk about what did you see there and your experience on the trip, especially, and I don't remember if you went before or after ISIS.
I went just before. So upon returning from my trip in 2014, it was just about 2 months before ISIS invaded the Nineveh Plains. So it was just before. Of course, circumstances have unfortunately changed, but I remember when I first came back, I was like the youngest, I might still be, but I was at the time the youngest person who had gone on Gishru. And it was, we did a series of speaking engagements, 5 or 6, to kind of let people know about what the conditions are of our people there and kind of just give a report back, similar as you and other participants have done this year. And I remember during all of those talks, the overwhelming feeling that was bubbling up was hope. I remember it was so hopeful. It was on the cusp of the Baghdad government passing the resolution to make the Nineveh Plains its own autonomous state, something that within Iraq, but something amazing foundation for our people. And there was so many other things that were just so hopeful. And I remember going on these little speaking engagements, and during the Q&A, people would always raise their hands and say, oh my goodness, like how poor are the people there? How needy are they? Like all of these kind of negative things. Are they safe? You know, how can we get them out? All of these kind of reactions. And I remember my response to all of them was like, no, there are people there that have a life and they are settled and they don't want to leave. Extraneous situations excluded, but it's our job to advocate for them, to support them as best we can. Again, there was so much hope there that the people that are Bnei Umta there, that are Assyrians there, had given to us at that time.
Tell me about the energy of the people there. In Dashtat Nineveh, in Nuhadra, in Erbil, in northern Iraq.
So as you mentioned, we started in Turabdin in Turkey and then drove into northern Iraq. And I would say that the first 4 days in Turkey were very emotional, negatively. They were very, very hard because wherever we would go, they would show us empty villages and would say, these used to be Suraya, these used to be Assyrian villages. This monastery that you're at, was just confiscated by the Turkish government. Everything was very, very negative, and it almost looked as if abandoned by Assyrians. We saw little, bubbles here and there of our people there. Like there's one village where people have moved back from Germany and have rehabilitated one village in Tur Abdin. Yeah. Of a couple, handful of families. But altogether, the overwhelming feeling in Tur Abdin was kind of like the bad guys won. It was kind of like we are extinct in this part of our homeland. And we are a history. We are coming to witness history. But when we got into Iraq, the first night was, New Year's Eve. It was right before all of the New Year's festivities for Khebnisen. And there was fireworks, dancing, thousands of Assyrians, young, old, kids, such an energy, such a happiness, such a spirit of perseverance that I remember in the first night, your co-host Akadina Yadegar was on my trip, and we literally turned to each other and we almost let out this big sigh of yeah, okay, cool, we're here, we are going, and it was very celebratory. So as far as kind of the mood, when I was there, the mood in Iraq was just very, very celebratory and happy and joyous. I would describe it as everywhere we went, people were just very joyful about the new year.
During your trip, you most likely made a visit to a few of the schools that are operated there in northern Iraq. What was your sense? What was your feeling walking into some of those schools and just sitting next to the students?
So if the slogan of my Gishrut trip was hope, I would say that the Assyrian Aid Society schools were the mascot. They were what were pushing the hope through. They were just the lifeblood because they were full of all these students that were the most behaved, the most prim, proper, smart, intelligent little kids that I've ever seen. Not even little kids, all throughout up to high school. And just seeing our language in that capacity where these students were studying biology, geometry, grammar, everything in our language from K through 12, and also juggling, the other languages that they are, should learn. It was impressive. It was hopeful. It was encouraging. Truly nothing I've ever seen before. It was one of those moments where you looked around and you said, oh my gosh, we're in Assyria.
Yeah. What specifically changed for you after the trip?
So many things. I would say my top 2 takeaways from the trip, perspective-wise, because it is a very perspective-shifting trip, like you said, was I think before the trip, number one, before the trip, I had a very small mindset or small... I had tunnel vision about our Assyrian community. I was born in Diaspora in the Bay Area. When I was growing up, there was no more than 5,000-6,000 Assyrians in the whole Bay Area. And I grew up in this small community. And to me, being Assyrian meant going to a church that speaks Assyrian on Sundays, and then going to a New Year's party and maybe, Nusayr or one other holiday throughout the year. And your parents have a strong accent. To me, that's what Assyrian meant. And growing up, I thought, okay, we're a couple thousand people here in the Bay Area, we're Assyrians. It's just kind of, I took it for granted. Coming back from the trip, it was so empowering because I was we're not just this random community thrown in California. We are around the world. We are in 4 countries. We have all of this big network, and I'm sure we come from different villages, we come from different countries. Our parents are from Turkey, they're from Iraq, Syria. We live in Germany and Sweden and Australia, but we are this global network of people that are all connected by all the shared things that creates a culture.
Yeah.
And that, I don't think I fully understood that perspective of how massive and powerful and how much potential our global network has. So that was one. And then the second takeaway that I think I had from the trip was that we have a country. It just is, besieged and occupied right now. But I think before, so many of us in diaspora, we love to give the spiel to our coworkers and to non-Assyrians. And the first thing we say is, well, we don't have a country. Assyrians don't have a country. We don't have a government. That's true. But we have a country, and it belongs to all of us, and going there and seeing it was very empowering, and it's something that I think we all need to do and to own a little bit more.
What really gives me even more hope is when I read, sometimes I'll read about Iraqi politicians, Iraqis abroad, Iraqis in exile that have left, that have been neighbors with Assyrians, that have grew up with Assyrians, and they're not Assyrians themselves. And a lot of them say, Iraq without Assyrians is not Iraq. That gives me hope because it's people within our society that really understand the mosaic, the fabric, what we bring to the table as an indigenous, and lately I've been using the term indigenous people, not a minority. Yeah.
I love that.
You wrote a piece about .com as a home. Can you talk more about what inspired you to write that and what the central message of it was?
That was an op-ed that I contributed to the Assyrian Journal. Essentially, for anyone who's listening that might have not read it, the op-ed was essentially stating how the internet and the digital age kind of has created this faux digital homeland for diaspora Assyrians. It's given us the platform to communicate ideas, to find one another maybe romantically, to find each other ideologically, and all these things that if we were in diaspora in the current state that we were in an era without the internet, I don't think we could have sustained ourselves in a lot of ways that we are. And so as an Assyrian growing up in diaspora who always wanted to be connected to so many Assyrians through Twitter, through Instagram, even before that, like in chat, literally in chat rooms, dating myself with that comment. But, but in all those little ways, I've noticed that we have created these hubs and these online communities for each other where I feel very, very close to some Assyrians that I have never met in my life.
Yeah.
Which I think is really exciting. And it was something that in the op-ed, I look at it kind of throughout my lifetime. So early to late 90s, it was very restrictive. It was very like, you see a chat room or, things like that. And then slowly but surely with social networks, we see my parents using Facebook and finding old groups for their youth groups in their neighborhoods and their old cities and finding, oh my gosh, my neighbor, my student from 30 years, I didn't know what country they ended up in. And now we're chatting. And then on Twitter, if you guys are on, Assyrian Twitter, you know how funny and awesome everybody is and we all kind of know each other. I've met up with people from Twitter at conventions and things like that. So all of those fed into the piece, and if you haven't read it, I encourage you to, because I'm not articulating it as well as when I wrote it.
And tell us a little bit about the Assyrian Journal, just to kind of set the listeners up to what it is.
Yeah, well, I don't think Joe Snell has been on yet.
No.
Okay, well, you guys should.
He promised me personally that I would be able to interview him. So
well, we're calling him out now on air. But yeah, Joe's put together an awesome online publication that has really great writers. One of my journalist friends, Rebecca Pirayu, is a writer on there. It's just really high quality journalism that covers issues from around the world for Assyrians.
Going back to your .com piece, your op-ed, what has your relationship been with the word home?
That's tough. I think it's been, troubled. I, like so many people that are born in diaspora, regardless of their community, but if you grow up with a strong culture in your family, none of us really are ever that home because we are always, juggling the two parts of our identities, maybe more than two parts.
Yeah.
And I think that for a really long time, especially in adolescence, I really struggled. I was like, I'm not, I tried really hard for a really long time to be, like so many of us do, as American as possible, or like as, mainstream as possible. And then I kind of switched, and for a while I was like, no, I'm completely Assyrian. I don't belong here at all. And kind of did some soul searching on that side. And I think through traveling and growing up and speaking to others that have been through this process, I think I've come to a medium place where I've realized that at least for now, my home is with others that understand my struggle.
Sure.
My home is with people like you. It's in this room right now where all of us have gone through these things and I don't have to explain myself. Home can be in an idea, home can be in things that are not physical.
Your relationship with the word home, did that change? Did this change after Gishru?
I think so. I think I might have gone into Gishru thinking that I'll go there and have all these feelings of belonging, which I did. But I think that even going there and realizing I'm so different than the Assyrians here too, as much as I am the same, I'm still very different. And I think that was almost very healthy for me because I realized that living in diaspora has changed me and being born in diaspora. And it's nothing to be sad about or want to change. It's just my identity. Yeah. And I think that just like they have different things to contribute to our culture, that I too have a different view of things that I can contribute to our culture. So my sense of home definitely changed. I mentioned earlier that I felt like I didn't have a true country, and I visited there and I felt that we do. And that definitely empowered my Assyrian identity and made me confident in it. But I think I definitely had a change of perspective, of course.
I definitely think that you've contributed to the Assyrians in diaspora, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, which I'm excited about. Are you hopeful or concerned for the future of Assyrians, and why?
I am very hopeful, definitely. Concern is something we should all have, but I think overwhelmingly I am hopeful. Every millennial Assyrian that I meet through the years, whether it be the Assyrians that I was lucky to meet that were young in Atra, or the ones that I continue to meet around the world in diaspora, they are all so different than our elders. And with all due respect to our elders, there's just a sense of unity among young Assyrians, and a sense of not focusing on what makes us different, of your village, my village, your country, my country, your religion, my religion. Sure, we also have our own problems, but overall, there is a sense of shared vision that I think is really refreshing. And I love talking to young Assyrians about it, because it is what keeps me going. And I think there's this fine line that we learn to toe, and that's that to take advantage of all the opportunities that were given, that were denied to our parents and grandparents, but then to not just take those opportunities to enrich ourselves, but also to take back with those opportunities and to give back to our communities and to move our whole cause and our people forward.
Absolutely. If you were stuck on an island, what is one Assyrian thing you could not live without?
Ooh. I would just say Rizza. I'm like a big rice guy. I'd have to bring some nice Assyrian basmati Rizza with me on that island.
So you're just having rice the whole time on that island.
And I would be, and people who know me know that I would be pretty happy with that.
Nice. I like that. What are your plans for the future as it pertains to your career?
I've been working for about 2 years now in the Bay Area, like I mentioned, in the world of government relations. I'm going to be going back to school because I like having no income, apparently. No, I'll be going back to school this fall. So I'll be pursuing my master's in international relations at the London School of Economics.
What led you to the London School of Economics?
Luck. I had kind of an international background in some other jobs and internships that I had done, both as a student and beyond. And those opportunities were really meaningful for me. I think I got a good grasp of working in the field that I am now, but wanted to get a new international perspective. I'd studied it abroad in an institution similar to LSE, so I knew that I would be a good match for it. Was lucky enough to get into their program and hopefully use that degree to shift my career a little more internationally.
We're going to switch gears now. Akadina, I want you to introduce yourself, who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Akadina. I'm from San Jose, born and raised. I went to the University of San Francisco, where I studied business entrepreneurship and innovation. I'm currently working at Plug and Play Tech Center, where I get to work with startups on business development, mentorships, and partnership.
How long have you been there?
8 months.
Okay, so Nardin and Akadina. When and how did both of you come up with the concept of Diaspora and Bloom? And for the listeners that are out there that were not able to visit the exhibit, tell us a little bit about that and then go into how you came up with the concept.
Sure. So Diaspora and Bloom was an exhibition that Akadina and I organized in June of this year, of 2019. And it was a contemporary Assyrian art show that was a group show focusing on contemporary Assyrian art.
Yeah, and we came up with the idea about a year ago. We go to a lot of galleries and museums in the area, and on one particular trip to the Cantor Museum on Stanford University's campus, we saw this exhibit, and we walked away kind of not really resonating with the work, and like it was a cultural exhibit, so we were just like, oh, okay, like that was really interesting, but wouldn't it be really cool if we saw Assyrian contemporary art in a gallery talking about contemporary Assyrian issues, focusing on the present Assyrian experience. And so that's kind of where the idea was born, and that's what we did.
And where was, for the listeners out there that weren't at the exhibit, where was the exhibit hosted?
Downtown San Jose.
Our art gallery. It's a gallery in like the arts district of downtown San Jose.
Okay, so you had a catalyst, and then tell me about your next steps. Was it reaching out to the artists? Was it you two sitting down and figuring out, okay, what are we going to feature in this exhibit, the themes?
We have this note that we called the OG notes. And it was literally the first day we just wrote down like every idea we had that could possibly be in the exhibit. Yeah, total brain dump. And then from there, we just picked what we would really want to see in the exhibit. And then from there,
so once we formulated our vision and clarified what we were looking for a little bit more, at that point, we got on our phones and went on Instagram, and we found a lot of these artists on Instagram. And so we started looking at hashtags like Assyrian art, people that we had seen in various spaces creating the type of art we wanted. We reached out to Kalogerakos, Esther, Aliyah, and Rabbi Shmuel, and they were gracious enough to trust us without knowing us, and they really believed in the vision and what we were trying to do with the show.
Did you have any other advisors besides the two of you writing notes and OG, or besides the two of you writing OG notes? Was there anyone that was impactful or a sounding board?
We'd like to thank Google.
Google was a huge help, helpful. We also did a lot of focus groups with our friends. We focus grouped the title, so we sat everybody down. We're like, here are 5 titles. What do you like? And that's how we landed on Diaspora and Bloom.
And in general, just any kind of connection to the art world through our friendship network that we had, we really just tapped them for advice and pro tips. But largely, this was us learning as we went.
I, for one, went on I believe it was a Friday evening or so, I don't know what evening it was, one of the evenings. I loved as you're walking in, to the right of the door was this, you had backgammon, a vinyl LP of Assyrian Sarkis, a sliwa, a rear view mirror with the Assyrian flag, and it really took me back to like when I visited Chicago for the first time years ago, and everyone had the Assyrian flag hanging in their rear view mirror. And then I saw Juliana Jindu's VHS. I was like,
Flowers of Assyria.
Yeah, exactly. Who was kind of behind that modern or sort of diaspora? This is what Assyrians were represented by in the 80s and 90s. Because it really took me back to my childhood.
Sure. So throughout the exhibit, to weave between the artists, we really were intentional with trying to make it an experiential gallery and to make visiting Diaspora and Bloom an experience. We did that was between the artworks, me and Akadina had organized little pop-up, installations.
Sure, yeah.
So we had put little installations between the artworks, and the last one, as you were about to leave the gallery, is what you're talking about, which it was called Objects of the Assyrian American Experience.
Yeah, I think that was the first thing that attracted me. And that I know you told me naturally where to start, which was the opposite.
Yeah. That's where you're supposed to end.
And the flow, and once you get there, it is supposed to evoke those feelings of nostalgia that we all have, and seeing all those items put together, defining our experience in a humorous but very aesthetic way.
Rebel is one of my close friends, and to see other Assyrians like Atra and Esther that I had not heard of, and I follow Esther now. Atra I need to find, but I love Esther's art, because I do connect with, especially her portraits. She shows these portraits where, and every Assyrian family has these portraits where the family's not smiling, they're sad, and I don't know if it's like the theme of photography back then. I was listening to an NPR bit that might have been a theme of photography back then, where everyone was just kind of like smug, I guess, but you really connect with that.
Yeah, and I think I'd also add that when we were doing the installation, and for those that might have not seen the show, maybe you've seen her paintings online, but they are massive. They are 5 by 6, massive. So we were hanging up these paintings, and I remember when we put up the portrait together, it's called History Seep Through the Cracks. And so we put it up, and when we saw it, we just took a step back, and we were both struck by the fact that we've never seen such Assyrian faces painted in modern art. And something as little as that kind of representation staring back at us, and our history literally staring back at us in such a cool contemporary way.
And I want the listeners to go out there and follow Esther Leah, and I'll include her information in the show notes as well. What I found most peculiar, and I think I asked Paul Gabriel, one of my friends, is that why are the bodies of the faces a different color other than this human complexion color? And that's something obviously I have to ask the artist, but definitely the exhibit invoked a lot of feelings. One of the most happiest photos that I saw there was photo that was taken back in the 60s and the 70s in Alposh or Deshtetnwa, where they're wearing traditional Assyrian clothing.
Yeah.
And I want tell me how you came about that photo and the permissions and the rights to display that photo.
Sure. So the series of photography that you're talking about was taken by a late photographer who was not Assyrian, so he's actually belated. But we found the series online on the Dominican archive. People can go online and see like the lower res versions of them.
Okay.
But when we saw them, we were like, oh my goodness, we have to have them. They just wove perfectly within the narrative because they were, people in the 60s, like you said, wearing folklore clothes. But what really struck us about the series of photos was that they were all Assyrian women.
Yeah.
They were all, strong women in the 60s with no men in any of the photos. And I think that's cool for many reasons. It touched us. But one of them was that it's kind of in an era in the 60s where everything was kind of male-centric. And the photographer turned the camera back and said, I'm going to focus on the women and the girls of this culture. And Assyrian women are really what are the lifeblood of our culture and what have preserved us, created new life, and instilled our traditions to keep it going. So it was a cool perspective of focusing on the Assyrian woman and elevating her. And so that was the reason why we chose them. Mm-hmm. The institute that owns the series now is located in the UK. So we actually reached out to the institute. Father Najib, who does a lot of work in northern Iraq preserving old Assyrian manuscripts, was also part of the process. And they said, we love what you're trying to do and we would love to have your photos included.
That's amazing. Tell us about the publicity that the exhibit received.
Yeah, so we sent out a press release and we got a bit of good feedback. We talked to KQED, which is NPR's largest member station. We got to speak to Mercury News. We were on Shamira Media, ANB, and also the Assyrian Journal.
And the Mercury News being the San Jose Mercury
Yes, the
News.
San Jose Mercury News.
What were some of the challenges in setting up the exhibit?
I think our learning process was a challenge. We obviously have no background. We talked a little bit about our backgrounds, but we have no art experience. So it was learning what it takes to actually put on an exhibit, and then from there, putting that together.
I'd also say kind of two of the more obvious ones would be resources. We had a list of things that we were not willing to compromise on for this exhibition. We wanted to be of the utmost level of professionalism, to attract folks that are of non-Assyrian background from throughout the Bay Area. And to do that, you need a certain level of quality that we were uncompromisingly pursuing. And so resources were necessary. We're not an organization. We're just two individuals, which was great to see that we were able to successfully crowdfund this show. A lot of people that we've never even met believed in us, and they donated between $5, $20, $100, all online. Another challenge that we had was getting the word out. So we really believed in what we were doing, but you want people to come as many as possible. And thankfully, through outlets like KQED and Mercury News, we were able to attract literally over 1,000 people through the run of this exhibition.
What were some of those compromises?
We didn't want to compromise on the gallery space. That was, I think, one of the most important pieces. We really wanted to see our vision come to life, and I think it was an experience that we wanted to see, and we thought maybe other people would want to see that, and we didn't want to compromise on that vision.
Mm-hmm. Where do you two go from here? Is there a Diaspora and Bloom 2.0? Is there another theme that you two want to explore? You've started now. You can't stop now.
So we've naturally gotten that question a lot. Will you do it again? Will you do it again? And of course, never say never. Anything is possible. But I kind of wanted to delve into the title of the show and then tie it back into your answer, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So Diaspora in Bloom, the way we got the title was the Assyrian idiom that says Nisan b'chaver de le'ave, which means spring doesn't happen with just one flower. It means that if you want a movement to happen, you need a bunch of people on board. One person can't make a movement. And in the show, each artist represents a flower blooming, in their talent, giving us their talent. But past the artist blooming, it's also each of us in Diaspora blooming with our own talents. We can each kind of use our own talents and professions to elevate our culture and move our people forward, just like Atra, Esther, and Rebel do with their art. So when people ask us, will we do it again? My answer so far has been to point to the show and say, if you were inspired by what you saw, know that this was to show what is possible.
Yeah.
And it showed what is possible in the realm of Assyrian artists blooming. But you, Peter, and you, listener, and you, ex-professional, you can also bloom. And you can take our culture to the next level and push us into the 21st century, which was, the central point of the exhibition, through your own talent.
Yeah. And you might even have other artists emerging that want to share their work or propose some sort of idea to you two about, the next exhibition. I noticed, a week or so ago, and we're now in late July, I guess you could say I was a patron of Diaspora in Bloom because I believed in, but I received a thank you card. Those beautifully printed colors that said Hawitum Basime and flowers and this wonderful design. Tell me about where that was printed and who printed that and who designed that.
Sure. So one thing that we were really intentional about was working and promoting Assyrian vendors. So of course we wanted to introduce Atra, Esther, and Rabel to the community, but beyond that, we want to support creative Assyrians, I guess I should say, in other fields. So florists, catering, all of those little things, we wanted to make sure that they were also Assyrian. One of those was an independent letterpress located here in the Bay in Oakland. Go Oakland. And her name was Anna Khengeldi. And Anna Khengeldi also goes by Anna Kingsley. She lives in Oakland, and her printing company is called Pickpockety Press.
Okay.
You can find her on Instagram online, and she's really great. She actually started following our page. We came across her work through Instagram, and we reached out to her and said, hey, there's this project we're doing. We would love to have custom work through you. And she absolutely loved the vision, ended up coming to opening night and supporting the show. And she went through a series of designs inspired by the Bloom theme. We ended up landing on one where she uses the Assyrian rosette, kind of makes it a little more modern and incorporates our language as well.
What was the reaction from visitors within our community?
The reaction within our community was very, very positive. I think young people really resonated with it. I think it really spoke to their experience.
And I think that Assyrians of all ages were moved by feeling represented, which is something that we very rarely get to feel as Assyrians.
Like you guys said, this resonates with me. These two curators get what I'm feeling, what I'm going through. First generation feel to it. While I was at the exhibition, I saw a few non-Assyrians there. Did you get any reaction from non-Assyrians?
Yeah, we got also really good feedback from non-Assyrians. I think the goal of the show had universal themes of cultural continuity and community.
Yeah, I think both of those, like the universal themes in the show that Akadina points out, resonate with everybody from kind of any background. And beyond that, I think that especially in the Bay Area, we have a growing community, and non-Assyrians were excited to hear from us. And to hear from us in such a fresh way. They really were moved by the art. Non-Assyrians purchased art. They purchased merchandise. I think they accounted for at least half of the visitors of the show. Another thing is that they really liked, in this political climate that we live in, I think that non-Assyrians really had a big takeaway of seeing what immigrant communities in particular that came here as refugees, like our entire community did, to see what they're creating, what we're giving back to the community, which is beautiful, amazing art.
Absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the exhibition was part of the San Jose Art Walk, or the first Friday Art Walk?
That's correct.
Yes, I believe we were stop 13.
You touch on this in the exhibit, and I want to personally know, what does it mean to you to grow up Assyrian American? How does that shape your perspective?
I think to me, growing up Assyrian American and being an Assyrian American today is, it's a balancing act. That hyphen that they put in between our identities is not an easy one, but it's also an important one that is very critical. And so I think to me, it's honoring and respecting both sides of that hyphen and realizing that the opportunity provided through the American side should be used to strengthen the Assyrian side, because that is my history and that is what I owe my existence to and my identity to. Mm-hmm. I think the show is nice because it validates that. It validates the sense of community. It validates a lot of trauma and sad things that have happened to our communities, but it also uplifts us. I think that people were leaving our exhibition, they were leaving Diaspora in Bloom uplifted. Even though the themes were heavy, people were leaving positive and ready to move forward. And so as an Assyrian American, I think it is my duty, and I hope others see it the same, to give back to our communities and to take what we are exposed to in America and to give it back and invest it back, for lack of a better word, into our Assyrian communities.
In what ways did the exhibit elevate modern over ancient?
This was one of the pieces that we really, really didn't want to compromise on, and one of the driving factors of the whole show. We see a lot of ancient art. We see a lot of ancient art in galleries. We see them at the convention exhibit, which are all beautiful nods to our history, but at the same time don't really speak to our current situation. The goal of the exhibit was to really, again, elevate the modern over the ancient and to focus and spotlight contemporary Assyrian artists who are speaking to our current situation.
And Peter, just like you mentioned, when you left the show, you were moved. I think part of that feeling and part of being moved was your reaction to art that was pushing your mindset and moving it to the future and kind of pushing our perspective to the future. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why Rebel, Esther, and Atra's art is so phenomenal, is because it does just that. It forces you to think about being Assyrian and think about the 21st century at the same time, which is really, really important to propel our communities forward.
And I asked you earlier the feedback from the Assyrian community. Have you received feedback from artists that are interested in collaborating with you two on perhaps a 2.0 or 3.0?
Yeah, definitely. We've had a lot of artists reach out. Again, we don't know what's happening next, but we'll definitely be in contact.
Nardin, I'm going to focus the interview back on you now. It's evident you have an eye and a passion for art and how it represents us. So much so that in addition to the Diaspora and Bloom project, people may be surprised to know that you're the person behind the social media account at Mesoportrayal. That's right, listeners. You heard it here first on Assyrian Podcast. Could you walk us through how the idea came about and what Mesoportrayal means to you personally?
Yeah, well, that's true. You heard it here first. After 3 years of having the account, I've had a lot of messages and comments asking, who's behind the page. But it's exciting to put it out there on the Assyrian Podcast.
That's you.
That's me. Mesoportrayal, if you do not follow, I came up with the Instagram account 3 years ago, actually 3 years ago exactly. And over the years, I've garnered about 10,000 followers on the page. And I've heard it described, pretty accurately in a number of ways. I've heard it described as a Mesopotamian mood board, as an Assyrian counterculture, digital arts district of Assyria, really like cool kind of taglines. And then the actual page, I've described it myself as celebrating contemporary Assyrian art, correcting the misportrayal of the beautiful Mesopotamia, which is where the handle name idea came about. And then my current tagline on the page is for the modern Mesopotamian.
Wow.
So all of those ideas, inspire how I edit and what I post on the page. What it means to me, I think it's just my creative Assyrian outlet. I like to think of myself as creative, and outside of projects, I was pretty quiet on the page while Diaspora and Bloom was going on because didn't have too much time. But I think day to day, it's just a fun way for me to collect cool things that I see for myself and things I find interesting, and hopefully followers do too.
Where do you collect these things from? Because I've seen photos, whether it's artists, singers, Assyrians that I've never heard of, and I'm like, how does this individual, now you, how do you procure?
I'll just say that I never take off like my content curate hat. As like whenever I'm on my phone, doesn't matter. I don't set out time to curate content for the page. Mm-hmm. Whatever I'm looking at or reading about, which is often Assyrian related, if I see something cool, I'll screenshot it. If I see some kind of, montage posted just the other day, I saw a cool video about Hannibal Alchas. It was like about his life, and I was like screenshotting as the PowerPoint was going on because I was like, these are awesome posts that I want to share. So I guess just constantly I'm just sharing and saving and all of that. And then I put it all in one file. And slowly I funnel it out. Yep.
Have you been receiving content from users out there on Instagram?
I have, yeah. I've gotten a lot of submissions from like artists and creatives themselves that will try to, share things with the page and say, hey, I would love to be featured. And then more likely than not, a lot of followers will share things with me and tag things with the page and say, hey, this is totally Mesoportrayal's vibe. Yeah. I get that a lot.
How do you choose what makes it to the page or to the Instagram? The gram.
Right. Well, most of the followers follow Mesoportrayal on Instagram, but we're also on Twitter and Facebook. So be generous with your follows.
And can you repeat the handle again?
Yeah, it's at Mesoportrayal.
MESOPORTRAYAL.
That's it.
Nice.
That's it. As far as how I kind of decide what makes it on the page, it's a little murky. I don't have like an exact criteria. It's usually just something that I think kind of fits into a few like perspectives and mindsets that I have. It came about originally also from following a lot of other Assyrian pages, and a lot of respect to them, but I was just seeing a lot of kind of drab conservative content. And I don't mean conservative politically, but in that it had a conservative or narrow definition of what qualifies as Assyrian content. Like if something had Allah Ashur stamped on it or was Jilat Khumala, they would just post, that and the Assyrian flag, and people, would lose their minds and love it. Yeah. But I didn't feel like that was good enough. Basically, in short, I didn't really want to have to choose between Assyrian content and good content.
Sure.
And aesthetic content. And I think I always had a picture in my head of what it meant to be Assyrian, and I wanted all of those little images that I had seen that defined what being a modern Assyrian meant to me reflected back in one feed and in one place. Mm-hmm. When I think about all of those things at once, when I see something that kind of fits into that mindset, I save it.
What are the outcomes you've witnessed in having the page throughout the last 3 years?
I think a lot, but for one of the most meaningful ones to me is seeing how the page has kind of become a forum and like a meeting place for a lot of like-minded Assyrians. The page is pretty progressive, arts-focused, humorous, and all of those kind of tend to gather a certain type of Assyrian. And I've noticed that in the comment section or people reposting to their own stories and whatnot, that it's kind of created like this internet subculture for Assyrians where that, do you follow Mesoportrayal, or you'll find someone in the comment section. It immediately is like that common ground of we get each other, and which I think has been really fun to see how it's become that kind of forum for young Assyrians, this kind of secular online space.
What's interesting is you bring on this point of connection, and Joe Danavi, him and I actually became friends by way of Assyrian Voice Network. It was a forum where you would log into the forum and you would write, you would have discussions, and Assyrian Voice Network would have gatherings, like they would get together in Chicago. The users in Chicago or even Detroit would come together. Do you see like Mesoportrayal gatherings happening around the U.S.?
Can we call it Mesoportrayal meetup?
I'm ready for it. Maybe convention can serve as that outlet where all of these users come together and identify themselves. But do you see that kind of taking it from Instagram and from Twitter and into real physical, life, into social interaction?
Yeah, I love that idea. I think we should definitely coin Mesoportrayal meetup right now.
That'd be cool.
Coming to a city near you. I love that.
Who's your favorite artist? Who's your favorite Assyrian artist?
So my...
She's ready to answer.
You can't say that.
I'm really about to say it. So my favorite artist has to be... I have many, many favorites at the moment, but my all-time favorite that has always served as an inspiration to me has always been Hannibal Alchas, for both his paintings and his poetry. And I think, for most of us are all familiar with his work, and it doesn't really need, me to sit here and explain why I love it so much. Yeah. Aside from his, talent that's renowned and he's in the Met and all of that. For me personally, I think why he was so inspirational is that across his work, he would kind of take these exceptional mainstream ideas that he was exposed to, and he'd bring them back into the Assyrian and like Middle Eastern awareness.
Sure.
And so, like, just for instance, he translated Hafez's poetry into the Assyrian language and would record himself reading beautiful poetry that's known around the world, and he infused it into our language, preserving beautiful vocabulary not only, but also these ideas of love and all of these things that Hafez touches on, and he brought it in and infused it into our culture. Mm-hmm. Other things that he does, he all his series of portraits, the people that he chooses to paint, subjects like Farrukh Farrokhzad, Frida Kahlo, Buddha, those were the subjects he chose to paint. He didn't just paint another Malik Tashamiram in a Kaliska, but he decided to take these amazing thinkers from around the world and write Assyrian poetry over them and bring them into our consciousness. And I think that is so inspirational.
Yeah, absolutely. I've come across Hannibal's work by way of Rebel B'Shmuel. He was the first one to introduce me to Hannibal. Amanul B'Yonan recently featured in his album and sang Yudet Libbi, and he talks about
Hannibal ببداية رويا مخبخت لاشتايا بيعمد مشختخ لاشلايا امكولا بخاج بيننا قيودت لبي تانينا قيودت لبي تانينا يا طوام كيخ وبريشا يا شبرا بخرش خريشا يا دوشم درد قريشا وبقراش منا بليشانا خلي يد يمي برخش شخي.
he probably wrote that 60 years ago, 70 years ago, but to this day, like, I can identify with that sort of poem. And so I feel as though he really transcends and really sets himself apart from the Assyrian art that we have been used to seeing and to modern Assyrian art, where we can relate to as well 3 generations after.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And universally, he's universally loved, like outside of our community.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
So,
West. I know he spent a considerable amount of time in America.
yeah.
We have listeners from all over the world. If you had one thing to say to them, what would it be?
I think I'd have to say, don't compromise your modernity or your Assyrian identity. Embrace both and be better for it.
Support, support, support your Assyrian artists.
Well, Nardin and Akadina, thank you for being on this week's episode of the Assyrian Podcast. I had a lot of fun. This has been my favorite interview to date. So thank you
Oh my
too.
goodness.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, help us out by sharing it out. Whether that's on your social media or telling someone about it, we appreciate all of your support and continuing to spread the word about the podcast. Thank you all. That's it for this week. We'll see you next week.